Thanks for joining us. I'm John Razimus. In this episode, instead of reviewing one occult book, I'm going to take a question that someone asked me. Instead of focusing on one book, I'm going to be focusing on 12 occult authors that are worth reading, in my opinion. Now, everyone has their own tastes and why they're even reading occult books. I read occult books for completely different reasons than, let's say, an occultist that wants to go through the magic rituals, go through the systems, through the initiatory process, go through the summoning of different entities. That has never been my intention ever of why I read occult books. A supernatural, extremely paranormal event happened in my life. For everyone that's familiar with this channel, go to my other videos, especially the Poltergeist Haunting of John Razimus playlist, if you want to learn more about my experiences. But those events caused me to be intrigued on the subject of the unseen world, the world we cannot see. Even science admits there are dimensions, there are things around us we cannot see. Even the spectrum of light alone, we can only see a tiny fraction of what is really out there in the universe. But aside from all of that, I'm going to answer Angel M's question. Dear Mr. Razimus, I have recently stumbled upon your channel on YouTube, and it would be an understatement to say that you produce quality, educating content. Through your channel, first-hand experiences, and with otherworldly things and novels, such as the works of Lovecraft, I have dedicated to put some time aside to study the occult, purely for research and educational purposes, of course. I myself am very much an anti-occultist, in that I have absolutely no interest in summoning or trying any kind of rituals in said tomes. I just wanted to know where you think I should start my research and which books should I divert my attention to. I love your content and am very much a fan. Sincerely, Angel M. So thank you, Angel M, for that question. Even though I've received it before, I never thoroughly gave it a good response. And I compiled a list of 12 authors, and let's take a look at the list, not necessarily top 12, let's just say 12 of the best occult authors I've ran into in the past 6 years. So, yes, I have been studying the occult for 6 years, or it's probably closer to 5 years. So in 5 years' time, I wouldn't consider myself an expert on the subject. I've just really thoroughly been grabbing at everything which piques my interest. Anything that looks interesting, I grab it. I see something on eBay, it's too much, I'll go to Amazon. It's too much, I'll look for the PDF on Google. You can find many free PDFs of all these ancient codexes, tomes, and manuscripts and grimoires on Google. I've found firsthand. I encourage you to get a physical book, but if you are into Kindle or PDF, that's great. You can do that too. I like physical books. I have many PDFs. I probably have a folder with 1,000 occult books in it that I didn't buy off eBay. I compiled that list myself from downloading 1,000 individually different grimoires, codexes. Most of them are medieval and ancient, or even pre-medieval, and so they don't have any copyright restrictions. So you can't find a lot of old stuff. My list contains both old authors and new authors, mostly within the past 100 years, but there probably are a couple that are the past 1,000 years. Let's take a look at my list. This is the list of prominent occult authors where I would start with. You might find a different path and find different authors that you are more interested in. For example, if you're interested in astrology, you might go a totally different direction. Number 1, and this is in no particular order. This isn't greatest to worst or worst to greatest. This is just off the top of my head thinking, this guy's pretty good. Richard Cavendish. Richard Cavendish produced a series called Man, Myth, and Magic. Very generic time books looking encyclopedia. But aside from that, he's actually a pretty good occult author. He wrote The Black Arts, actually a very interesting compendium of different occult sciences. It starts off with a big old picture of the old Baphomet, and that might throw some people off. But there are some stories in here I haven't read anywhere else. He was definitely a scholar, definitely researched many things, and he does lean pro-Crowley. And in my personal opinion, I'm not pro-Crowley. But even though he leans pro-Crowley, and even goes so far as to say he believes Crowley was reincarnated as the person he claims he was reincarnated from, he is very well versed in astrology, numerology, you name it. Many, many, many different fields of the occult. Very good researcher, very good compiler of many different occult arts. The next author I would recommend is Arthur Edward Waite. Recently picked up probably one of the most popular books from Arthur Edward Waite, The Ceremonial Book of Magic. And this is the guy that David Bowie said is legit. In that quote where David Bowie calls Aleister Crowley a charlatan, he says, Arthur Edward Waite is real. He's legit. Now, that was Bowie's opinion. I personally think a lot of the stuff Crowley did might have been legit, but I just don't agree with his message. But Arthur Edward Waite, similar to the last author, he compiles in this book, The Ceremonial Book of Magic, a very thorough tome of information. It even answered a question I had about this symbol right here. I was asked about this symbol. E.A. Koetting clearly uses this symbol on the front cover of his book, The Book of Azazel. And I was totally ignorant of the origins of this symbol because I've only been researching this stuff for 5 years. It's called the Goetic Circle of Pax. And E.A. definitely made a pact with Azazel. Perhaps that's why he used the symbol, or maybe he liked it. He stylized it and changed it slightly, but it's clearly the same symbol. But Arthur Edward Waite, there are just many pages after pages. There are pages in this book that have personally answered some questions I had about my personal supernatural experiences. A lot of the stuff he just compiles from earlier occult works, but he answered, and many of these encyclopedic collecting authors have answered my questions. And I'm going to release what they answered in my book, Corners of Rooms, coming soon. When I say coming soon, it's down the road. And even when I'm 100% done writing it, I have to find a publishing factory that will do exactly as I say. I really want a hard copy. I really want it to look nice. The third author on this list, in no particular order, is Kurt Seligmann. Now, Kurt Seligmann, I can't claim that I know too much about him, but I did pick up this book by Kurt Seligmann called Magic, Supernaturalism, and Religion. And I noticed he has a lot of books on the occult. I haven't actually read through this book. I have many books I haven't had the time to read through yet. But it looks like there's a lot of really cool woodcuts involving demons and angels. And here we have, yes, I did mention this book in a previous video. The Mirror of Magic by Kurt Seligmann. Very cool book. It was changed from the Mirror of Magic to the History of Magic, probably because it wasn't flying off the shelves and he didn't want to confuse people. It wasn't about mirror magic specifically. It's about magic in general. Another encyclopedic type of magic codex, just with a compendium of a lot of information. These are the type of authors I do enjoy because you need to get a general grasp of what the occult magic practices of the past really are. What are they? You would be confused if you didn't have a really nice reference point on the different perspectives of the history of what these practices were all about. L.W. DeLaurence. I've talked about L.W. a lot. One of my favorite occult authors. This is his Book of Death. A lot of people claimed he was a plagiarist, but really what L.W. DeLaurence was he was someone that really wanted to get the information out there. He used a lot of ancient resources, so you can't claim an ancient piece of information is exclusively yours. He was well versed in magical systems of China, of the Arab nations, of India, and he brought those back to the United States and probably Americanized, or at least described them from his perspective in English. So I do recommend his works, and he does offer a lot of insight on his opinions on what's going on. He was very enterprising. He had a catalog where you could buy magic handkerchiefs, magic lucky charms, magic gambling rings. So he definitely turned it into a business, and he used it to support himself. But that aside, he did know some actual occult secrets. I know firsthand after reading a couple chapters of the Book of Death that he most definitely did. The next author is Dr. John Dee and his black magic practicing partner, Edward Kelley. Enochian is a famous magical language, angelic language, brought about because of the work of Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelley. I don't have a book by Dr. John Dee. It would be nice to get one of his journals reproduced, and they can be found. But I do have multiple books which show Enochian, and that is thanks to Dr. Dee's work. But there are actually some journals that I have been meaning to get a hold of. I believe I do have in PDF format. A lot of his stuff is easy to find. Dr. John Dee, very famous. The Count of Saint Germain. He has a very famous pair of triangle alchemist books that he made with very cool illustrations in them. And I tried to get a hold of a reproduction of one of them. And it sold for maybe $100, maybe $150, $200. But the guy making them is very weary of selling them, because you go on eBay and they're $2,000. So I understand his hesitation, but I wanted to get it for research purposes. But I do have a PDF version of one of his alchemical compendiums. It's very short and is mostly full of symbols. You actually can't read too much of it. But what I know about alchemy is it's not just turning lead into gold. That was almost a side demonstration by the supposed alchemist experts of the past. It was a claim that I don't believe was ever proven, but supposedly some Rosicrucians proved it. But sleight of hand and magic, even the illusionary prestidigitation type, definitely existed in the past, and I suspect that was used to provide proof that lead into gold was ever a reality. The actual secret of alchemy, and I can make a whole video series about it, involves eternal life. Involves you drinking an alchemical mixture, the elixir of life, and living forever, both physically, spiritually, whatever the case may be. So alchemy goes beyond turning lead into gold. It focuses primarily in China as being the elixir of eternal life. In other cultures, the elixir of eternal life. Whether it's a fruit or a potion, it's usually involving drinking it for eternal health or a special access to the higher dimensions or higher gates of heaven in the next life. MacGregor Mathers wrote many books on the occult, was an expert on the subject. He wrote a book on necromancy. He wrote a book on compiling many different black magic beliefs and practices of the past. And he is one of the authors that people claim L.W. DeLaurence ripped off. And most definitely, I'm sure he borrowed. They really borrowed from each other. MacGregor Mathers was an expert on witchcraft. I don't particularly have a book by him, but I did own 2 books which were authored by MacGregor Mathers, who translated a lot of ancient texts, such as the Grimoire of Armadale, supposedly an angelic grimoire, and the Book of Abramelin the Mage, a very famous Magic Squares centered book, which is standard text requirement for orders such as the Golden Dawn. Paul Huson. I have this one book by Paul Huson, Mastering Witchcraft, a practical guide for witches, warlocks, and covens. But his name has popped up more than just this one book. He has multiple books on witchcraft and black magic, and he gives a beginner's look at what these practices are all about. A lot of these authors compile a lot of different pieces of information, from sigils to magic squares, numerology, astrology. Interesting book. I haven't thoroughly gone through it. When I thoroughly go through a book, I assure you I'm going to have a full episode reviewing that book. Francis Barrett. Francis Barrett wrote The Magus, one of the most famous compendiums of the magic arts. And I'm trying to get a copy of The Magus. It's easy to get a modern day copy. I just wanted to get a decently old copy, maybe from the 80s, maybe from the 70s, a hardbound copy. It famously has the depictions of demons, and they kind of look like Wolfman, which kind of shows you other people who claim they've seen demons. Some of them describe them as having Wolfman-like properties, or even satyr, half-man, half-goat-like properties. And even seeing them is usually not physically solid. It's usually with the mind's eye. But I can talk about that in other episodes. So Francis Barrett, The Magus, a staple of books that you should at least know about. I'm going to try my best to get a copy and do a review of that book. Rudolf Steiner wrote a book called The Way of Initiation, and many other books are along similar paths, where he explores the world of dead humans, ghosts. He probably thinks about what's up, and I believe he did leave his body or go to the astral realm, because in The Way of Initiation, he's talking about spiritual initiation by a spiritual master. Now, in the occult, initiation involves leaving your body or going to a lucid dream or going to an astral plane, seeing an entity that is native to that dimension, and that entity talks to you, and they usually represent an ascended master type position where they have a rank, and they want to initiate you and give you your own rank and title and status and symbol. And the ranks are interesting. It's repeated over and over again and again, which tells me it's an actual phenomenon that actually exists. If I had a dream where I floated into some astral lucid dream dimension and I saw an entity that looked all wise and had a beard, and he was like, "Yeah, I am the Grand King Master Chieftain of the blah blah blah, and I'm going to give you the title, I'm going to initiate you, give you the title of Inspector General, Commander of the 12th Legion." I would be like, "No thanks, I'm good. I don't want to be any of that. That's a fake title. You give me some fake status to make me feel better about myself. I'm good, no thanks." So that would be my response. Whereas a black magic practitioner, they have to go through that process so they can work up the chain. Kind of like in Kabbalah. Kabbalah, they work up some process. They work through some process. The exact process you can read about, but unless you're actually in that process firsthand, you really don't know, and it's probably different slightly for every single person. But Rudolf Steiner explores what initiation is. Other occult authors greatly talk about initiation. I know it's a real phenomenon, and it's interesting to research and know about, even if you're not interested in participating in such initiations. The next author is Manly P. Hall. Speaking of initiations, Manly P. Hall is, I would say, one of the most prominent anti-occultist yet occult researchers, experts in modern day times. He's one of my heroes. He has a library in Los Angeles. He has since passed on, but his library, most of it, is still intact. And I want to visit it one day, and I would like to film it and visit it and actually study some of the rare books there, as opposed to just go there for a tourist vacation. There's only one day that library is open. The other days are reserved for students. It's an actual school. I would actually be interested in going to a class at that school. I believe it's called the Philosophical Society. And even though it's less philosophy and more esoteric studies, that's what they called it. I've talked about this book many times. I'm going to do another review of this book after I read it and write down some thorough notes. The thing about occult books is the first time I read this, secrets flew into my mind. And I was like, wow. And I didn't write them down. So I read it a second time and only a few secrets came out. And I almost forgot all of the secrets from the first time I read this. So I need to really meditate, read this book with an open mind, and try to recapture some of those secrets that flew into my mind the first time I read it. It's called Initiates of the Flame by Manly P. Hall. He clearly knew about the initiatory process. L.W. DeLaurence clearly knew about the initiatory process. He clearly represents the flame on one of his books. And who I just also mentioned, Rudolf Steiner, knew about the initiatory process. Almost every occultist who really studies it, even in some small way, stumbles across this initiation. And even if you're an anti-occultist, you can still study occult books for informational purposes, for research purposes. But number 12, the 12th author I would recommend is, who I talk about a lot, E.A. Koetting. He's the most modern day occultist on this whole list. A lot of people think he's just a YouTuber, and he's just making comedy videos. Those exact same people are the exact same people that haven't read a single one of his books. So I challenge you, if you think any of these occultists or occult authors are just comedians, stand-up comedians that just write, this isn't Mark Twain fiction. This is stuff that goes into the realms of the unknown, unseen world. And when you, in any small way, have been touched or seen glimpses of, or have been approached by, or have in any way been able to see the unseen world, even if but for a few seconds, you can relate and know when someone's lying or not. Now, EA might definitely hype up his information and hype up his business and organization to sell books, just as L.W. DeLaurence did, and just as many of these authors did. But it doesn't mean the information at its core isn't true. Here's one book I read by E.A. Koetting called Ipsissimus, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Interesting book. Perhaps I'll do a review on it in the future. One of his books I've yet to do a review on, which I will in the future as well, is The Spider and the Green Butterfly. E.A. focused on voodoo, Vodun, Haitian voodoo, a religion from Haiti, originating from Africa, and a lot of people from Haiti were supposedly mad about it. These entities, if they're real, they live in this astral initiatory lucid dream type dimension. They don't actually physically live in Haiti or Africa. So I agree with EA in saying that most definitely anyone who can contact these entities should have the ability to do so, I personally would stay away from the entities. Now, concerning occult books, some books come with a warning saying, such as this book. This book comes with a warning. The warning is, don't even read it unless you want these entities to start noticing you, following you around, or wanting you to summon them. And I would take such advice with a grain of salt. I would also take it seriously. It can happen. You can be followed around by such entities. But I will read this book with no intentions of summoning the entities connected to it, for review purposes. I have many more authors on this list I wanted to mention, but that is at least part 1 in my list of the occult authors I recommend reading about and learning about. Until next time, this has been John Razimus with Occult Antiquarian Esoteric Book Review. Be seeing you.